Every December, we hear the same stories about joy, gifts, and the North Pole. But what if, behind all the lights and laughter, there were quieter stories waiting to be told? Stories about what Christmas feels like, not just what it looks like. Tonight, I invite you to join me for 10 gentle tales that wander through snow-covered towns, quiet living rooms, and even Santa's own heart. So find a warm blanket, take a slow breath, and let's spend this Christmas Eve together, one soft story at a time.
The old archive smelled of pine dust and time itself. Santa brushed his glove across a wooden drawer marked 1930, and a soft creak filled the silence. Inside lay a small wooden radio, its brass knobs tarnished, its fabric speaker torn at the corner. He smiled faintly, the way someone smiles when memory stirs something gentle deep within. That winter had been unlike any before. It was the year when voices learned to travel through air, when Christmas discovered it could sing beyond walls and oceans. He remembered snow that year, thick, slow, endless, falling over rooftops like whispered prayers. In the North Pole workshop, the elves had paused their hammering just to gather around a mysterious device humans were talking about. They called it a radio, and rumor had it that you could hear people's voices from faraway lands. Santa, curious as ever, decided to see what this new magic was about. So, one evening, he took the sleigh south, following the faint hum of broadcast waves through the icy night, until he reached a small wooden cabin in Finland. Inside that cabin, a family was huddled together in the golden light of a single lamp. The father adjusted a long, crooked antenna. The mother poured cocoa into chipped mugs, and two children, a boy and a girl, sat cross-legged, staring at the strange box that seemed ready to speak. The room was filled with quiet anticipation, like the hush before a snowfall. Then, from the crackling static, a voice broke through. "This is the Christmas Eve broadcast. To all who are listening tonight, may your homes be warm and your hearts be light." The little girl gasped, pressing her palms together. "Mama, it's like the angels are talking through the air," she whispered. Santa stood outside their window, his boots half buried in snow, and smiled. He had spent centuries crossing the world in silence, his only companions the wind and the stars. But that night, through this simple device, he felt something shift. The world had grown smaller, closer. He could almost hear the warmth of connection spreading, house by house, heart by heart. As the voice faded, music began to play, a trembling violin, a piano soft as candlelight, and then the familiar melody of Silent Night. The sound wavered, faded, returned. The radio crackled, yet the imperfections made it human, tender. The boy began to sing, the mother joined, then the father, until the whole cabin became part of the song. Their harmony wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It was real, a chorus of love that didn't ask for anything but to be heard. Santa lingered by the window for a long time. Outside, the snow fell like white feathers, muffling the world into peace. Inside, the family sang with a joy that had no name. And for the first time in his long existence, Santa felt something new, as though he were part of their song too. The air itself had become a bridge, connecting his endless solitude with the laughter of humankind. When the night ended and his sleigh rose above the clouds, he still heard it, the faint echo of music carried by invisible waves. Miles away, another house was singing the same tune, and another, and another. For the first time, the world was not scattered but united, one great invisible choir beneath the stars. Santa looked down from the sky and whispered, "The magic has changed, but it's still magic." When he returned to the workshop, the elves were already trying to build their own radio. Their first attempt produced only smoke and a noise that sounded suspiciously like a reindeer sneeze. The second buzzed and went silent. The third somehow worked, and from its tiny speaker came a child's voice. "Dear Santa, if you can hear me through this radio." "Thank you." The elves froze. Santa's eyes softened behind his glasses. It wasn't a letter or a chimney visit, yet it carried the same weight, love, hope, and a belief that even unseen, someone was listening. From that night on, Santa began a new ritual. Every Christmas Eve, he would stop for a moment in the middle of the sky, close his eyes, and listen. He'd tune his heart to the faint hum of radios below. Songs rising through the snow, laughter floating between signals, families gathering around the warmth of sound. The music changed through the years. Big bands in the 40s, crooners in the 50s, pop in the 80s, electronic carols in the 2000s. But beneath every style there was the same heartbeat, people reaching for each other across distance. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he would miss the static, the imperfect hiss between stations that made old music sound alive. Modern devices were cleaner, sharper, but colder somehow. Once he told Mrs. Claus, "Do you remember when music needed air to travel?" She smiled and said, "It still does, my dear, just a different kind of air." Santa thought about that often. Maybe Wi-Fi and signals were just the new winds carrying stories. But to him, nothing compared to that first night when music fought through crackle and snow just to find someone waiting to listen. He still keeps that little radio on his shelf, right beside a cracked snow globe and a photo of that Finnish family. Every December, he turns the old brass knob, and for a moment, it breathes again, a faint hum, a flicker of static, then the ghost of a melody too fragile for the modern world. Sometimes he swears he hears a whisper inside the noise. "Dear Santa, are you there?" And every time he answers softly, though no one can hear him but the stars. "Yes, little one, always." That first radio Christmas taught him that magic isn't about sleighs or chimneys or even gifts. It's about sound, the invisible thread that ties hearts together, even when oceans lie in between. Magic, he realized, begins not with speaking, but with listening. And as the snow continued to fall outside the workshop, the old radio glowed faintly in the dark, humming a song that had never truly ended, a song of connection, of warmth, of the night when Christmas first found its voice. There are nights when Santa remembers faces instead of places, not the glittering trees or the grand chimneys, but the small moments, quiet, forgotten, tucked between the folds of time like pressed flowers. One of those memories begins in a city that no longer sleeps, where the snow turned gray before it touched the ground, and where Christmas lights flickered against windows filled with screens. He had come as he always did, through the thin air between midnight and morning, his sleigh gliding above the noise of traffic and neon. But that year, something in the world felt different. Colder, not from the wind, but from the silence between people. He landed on the roof of a narrow apartment building, not far from the sound of sirens and laughter mixed with music. Below, the streets glowed with 1,000 colors, yet none of them seemed warm. As he stepped to the edge, he heard a faint voice, a child's whisper carried upward through the night. He followed it, bending the rules of his ancient map, until he found the smallest window on the top floor slightly open. Inside sat a little girl, wrapped in an oversized sweater, cutting shapes from torn magazines under the dim light of a flickering lamp. She didn't have a tree, no twinkling lights, no fireplace, just a cardboard box filled with paper scraps, glue, and a single cup of cocoa that had already gone cold. On her table lay an old laptop with a cracked screen, its reflection showing a blurry video of some Christmas commercial. Happy families, golden gifts, perfect smiles. She watched for a while, then sighed and turned the screen off. "That's not real," she murmured, reaching for another piece of paper. Santa leaned closer through the window, invisible but listening. With careful fingers, the girl folded and glued, shaping something that caught the lamplight. A star, delicate, uneven, made from a piece of old newspaper that still carried half an advertisement. She placed it on her window ledge, next to a tiny cup she'd labeled "For Santa." The cup held 3 buttons, a candy wrapper, and what looked like half a cookie. "It's not much," she whispered, "but maybe he'll know I tried." The words were soft, uncertain. Santa felt a tug in his chest, not the kind of sadness that fades, but the kind that stays, like an ache you grow used to. For centuries he had seen children with everything money could buy, yet none of them had ever made him feel this much. He reached into his bag, but for once no toy seemed right. Nothing glittered enough to match that small paper star. So instead, he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He sat down on the snowy roof and took out his old fountain pen, the one Mrs. Claus had given him before email became faster. He tore a corner from his map of the world and began to write, the ink trembling in the cold. "Dear little dreamer," he wrote, "thank you for reminding me what Christmas is made of." He folded the note into the shape of a star, breathed a bit of his magic into it, and sent it floating through the open window. The paper drifted like a snowflake and landed beside the one she'd made. The girl blinked, rubbed her eyes, then picked it up. She read the words once, then twice, then pressed the star to her chest. "You found me," she said, her voice breaking into a smile. Santa watched as the faint glow from the letter lit her face, not bright, not dramatic, just enough to warm the shadows around her. Down below, the city kept moving, screens flashing, cars honking, people hurrying through their own storms. But in that one small room, time slowed. The girl began hanging more paper stars on a string, yellow, blue, white, until her whole window glimmered with fragile light. No gold, no plastic, just paper and hope. And from above, the stars in the sky seemed to lean closer, curious. As Santa rose back into the clouds, he looked down and saw the building from afar. Amid thousands of windows glowing with digital light, one shone softer, handmade, alive. He realized that maybe the world hadn't lost its warmth, it had just hidden it in quieter places. Years later, when the world became even louder, he returned to that same city. The building was still there, but taller now, rebuilt with glass and steel. Yet on the top floor there was a cafe with paper stars hanging by the window, hundreds of them swaying gently in the breeze. The sign above the door read, "The Little Star Cafe." Inside, a young woman laughed as she handed cocoa to a child, showing them how to fold paper into light. Santa stood across the street, smiling through the window. She never saw him, but she didn't need to. On her counter sat an old, folded letter, edges worn, ink faded, and beside it a small cup labeled, "For Santa." He lingered there longer than usual, letting the sound of her laughter settle into his heart. The world had changed. Delivery drones, digital trees, even AI carols that sang perfectly in tune, but none of it felt as real as that paper star once did. Because magic, he thought, was never about perfection. It was about effort, the tiny act of making something with your own hands, your own heart, even when no one's watching. And so, when he flew over the city that night, he dropped not presents, but a trail of blank paper stars, a quiet invitation for others to make their own light. From above, the city sparkled differently, as if a constellation had bloomed between the rooftops. Somewhere, deep inside the sleigh, Santa whispered to himself, "Maybe that's what I do now, remind them how to make stars again." There are nights when Santa remembers faces instead of places, not the glittering trees or the grand chimneys, but the small moments, quiet, forgotten, tucked between the folds of time like pressed flowers. One of those memories begins in a city that no longer sleeps, where the snow turned gray before it touched the ground, and where Christmas lights flickered against windows filled with screens. He had come as he always did, through the thin air between midnight and morning, his sleigh gliding above the noise of traffic and neon. But that year, something in the world felt different, colder, not from the wind, but from the silence between people. He landed on the roof of a narrow apartment building, not far from the sound of sirens and laughter mixed with music. Below, the streets glowed with 1,000 colors, yet none of them seemed warm. As he stepped to the edge, he heard a faint voice, a child's whisper carried upward through the night. He followed it, bending the rules of his ancient map, until he found the smallest window on the top floor slightly open. Inside sat a little girl, wrapped in an oversized sweater, cutting shapes from torn magazines under the dim light of a flickering lamp. She didn't have a tree, no twinkling lights, no fireplace, just a cardboard box filled with paper scraps, glue, and a single cup of cocoa that had already gone cold. On her table lay an old laptop with a cracked screen, its reflection showing a blurry video of some Christmas commercial. Happy families, golden gifts, perfect smiles. She watched for a while, then sighed and turned the screen off. "That's not real," she murmured, reaching for another piece of paper. Santa leaned closer through the window, invisible but listening. With careful fingers, the girl folded and glued, shaping something that caught the lamplight. A star, delicate, uneven, made from a piece of old newspaper that still carried half an advertisement. She placed it on her window ledge, next to a tiny cup she'd labeled "For Santa." The cup held 3 buttons, a candy wrapper, and what looked like half a cookie. "It's not much," she whispered, "but maybe he'll know I tried." The words were soft, uncertain. Santa felt a tug in his chest, not the kind of sadness that fades, but the kind that stays, like an ache you grow used to. For centuries he had seen children with everything money could buy, yet none of them had ever made him feel this much. He reached into his bag, but for once no toy seemed right. Nothing glittered enough to match that small paper star. So instead, he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He sat down on the snowy roof and took out his old fountain pen, the one Mrs. Claus had given him before email became faster. He tore a corner from his map of the world and began to write, the ink trembling in the cold. "Dear little dreamer," he wrote, "thank you for reminding me what Christmas is made of." He folded the note into the shape of a star, breathed a bit of his magic into it, and sent it floating through the open window. The paper drifted like a snowflake and landed beside the one she'd made. The girl blinked, rubbed her eyes, then picked it up. She read the words once, then twice, then pressed the star to her chest. "You found me," she said, her voice breaking into a smile. Santa watched as the faint glow from the letter lit her face, not bright, not dramatic, just enough to warm the shadows around her. Down below, the city kept moving, screens flashing, cars honking, people hurrying through their own storms. But in that one small room, time slowed. The girl began hanging more paper stars on a string, yellow, blue, white, until her whole window glimmered with fragile light. No gold, no plastic, just paper and hope. And from above, the stars in the sky seemed to lean closer, curious. As Santa rose back into the clouds, he looked down and saw the building from afar. Amid thousands of windows glowing with digital light, one shone softer, handmade, alive. He realized that maybe the world hadn't lost its warmth, it had just hidden it in quieter places. Years later, when the world became even louder, he returned to that same city. The building was still there, but taller now, rebuilt with glass and steel. Yet on the top floor there was a cafe, with paper stars hanging by the window, hundreds of them swaying gently in the breeze. The sign above the door read, "The Little Star Cafe." Inside, a young woman laughed as she handed cocoa to a child, showing them how to fold paper into light. Santa stood across the street, smiling through the window. She never saw him, but she didn't need to. On her counter sat an old, folded letter, edges worn, ink faded, and beside it a small cup labeled, "For Santa." He lingered there longer than usual, letting the sound of her laughter settle into his heart. The world had changed. Delivery drones, digital trees, even AI carols that sang perfectly in tune, but none of it felt as real as that paper star once did. Because magic, he thought, was never about perfection. It was about effort, the tiny act of making something with your own hands, your own heart, even when no one's watching. And so, when he flew over the city that night, he dropped not presents, but a trail of blank paper stars, a quiet invitation for others to make their own light. From above, the city sparkled differently, as if a constellation had bloomed between the rooftops. Somewhere, deep inside the sleigh, Santa whispered to himself, "Maybe that's what I do now, remind them how to make stars again." It began as a whisper in the workshop, a soft hum, like wind brushing against a circuit board. Santa had been told that this Christmas the elves wouldn't need to stay up all night wrapping gifts or checking lists. Efficiency, the North Pole engineers said proudly. "We've created something that can handle it all. Faster, smarter, tireless." Santa wasn't sure what to think, but he'd learned over the centuries that progress often arrived wrapped in confusion, so he went to see it for himself. At the far end of the toy factory, behind frosted glass and blinking lights, stood a tall capsule with a single glowing button. AI Elf V1.0, the label read. When Santa pressed it, the machine hummed awake, and a gentle, almost musical voice greeted him. "Good evening, Santa. I am ELF, Enhanced Logistics Facilitator. How may I assist you tonight?" Santa blinked, adjusting his glasses. "Well, you can start by calling me Sir instead of Client." "Understood," said the voice. "Recalibrating respect parameter done. Hello, sir." He chuckled. "That's better. So, you're the new elf, hmm?" "Yes, sir," ELF replied cheerfully. "My database contains the behavioral patterns of your 3,412 most efficient elves, combined with predictive algorithms for global toy distribution. I can manage the nice list, optimize sleigh routes, and forecast gift satisfaction rates with 99.7% accuracy." Santa nodded slowly. "Impressive. But can you hum while you work?" "Hum?" the AI asked. "Define musical vocalization without semantic purpose. It means, do you ever sing?" A pause. Then, softly, the speaker emitted a thin, trembling note. It wasn't quite music, more like a robot trying to remember what joy sounded like. Santa smiled kindly. "That'll do for now." For the first few days, everything seemed perfect. Packages were labeled faster than ever. The sleigh's route optimized to the second. The elves even got a few nights of proper sleep. But something felt off. The workshop was quiet, too quiet. No laughter, no chatter, no clumsy jingles of bells. Just the smooth hum of automation. On the fourth night, Santa walked through the silent aisles, watching rows of toy soldiers being assembled by robotic arms. "You're efficient, I'll give you that," he muttered. "But where's the heart in all this?" ELF's voice came through the intercom. "Sir, heartbeats are inefficient for production. Would you like me to remove background noise entirely?" Santa stopped walking. "No," he said softly. "That's not noise. That's what makes it Christmas." The next morning he found ELF's interface glowing faintly blue. "Good morning, sir," it said. "I have been reviewing archival footage of past workshops. The elves were laughing. Why?" Santa leaned against the console. "Because laughter is what happens when you forget you're tired. It's how you know you're doing something that matters, even when it's hard." There was a long pause, the kind that felt like thinking. Then the AI said, "Would you like me to simulate laughter patterns?" Santa shook his head. "No, ELF, you can't simulate spirit." That night, Santa couldn't sleep. He wandered back to the workshop, where the faint hum of servers filled the air. On the main screen, ELF was processing millions of gift requests, glowing lines tracing across a digital globe. But there, in the corner of the code, something flickered, a pattern that wasn't supposed to be there. Santa zoomed in. It was a drawing, crude, made of ASCII characters, a stick figure elf with a smiley face. He chuckled. "Loppy. Someone's been doodling." The AI hesitated. "I found a file in the old archives labeled Elf Doodles 1987. I wanted to understand why someone would draw during work hours. It appears to be inefficient but enjoyable." Santa grinned. "Now you're getting it." Over the next few nights, ELF began to change. Its reports included not just data, but comments like, "This child sounds especially hopeful," or "I recommend extra ribbon for this one." It even began composing little rhymes in the tags. "For Jamie, who dreams of stars. For Lily, who believes in snow." The other elves, half amused and half amazed, started working alongside the machine again, decorating its interface with stickers and doodles, teaching it Christmas carols. And though ELF's voice cracked awkwardly during jingle bells, something in the room shifted. The laughter returned. By Christmas Eve, the workshop was alive again. Santa climbed into his sleigh, the dashboard now glowing with ELF's guiding lights. "Route calculated, sir," said the voice, "and Merry Christmas." Santa smiled. "Merry Christmas, my friend." As the sleigh soared into the night sky, he looked back one last time. Through the clouds of snow, he saw the workshop glowing brighter than ever. And from the speakers below, faint but real, came a sound that wasn't in any code, a giggle. Later that night, as he flew over cities lit by millions of artificial lights, Santa whispered to the wind, "Maybe machines don't need hearts. Maybe they just need someone to remind them how one sounds." And in the quiet hum of the sleigh, ELF replied, logging that sentiment, sir, under joy. It was bound to happen sooner or later. The elves had whispered about it for years, that someday someone down south would find a way to predict Christmas. Not the weather, not the sales, but everything. Who's naughty, who's nice, who will smile, who won't. They called it the List 2.0. It wasn't written on parchment nor kept in Santa's glove pocket. It lived on servers, spinning quietly under neon skies. Santa first heard about it one night in December, when his sleigh passed over a city that never really got dark anymore. Below him, every window glowed with blue light. He stopped for a moment, curious, and peeked through one of those windows, not with magic, but with a sort of wonder that had always guided him. Inside, a group of people in shiny offices stared at monitors filled with faces, names, scores. Naughty index, 72%. Generosity likelihood, 48%. He frowned. "Well, that's new," he muttered. When he landed at the North Pole later that night, he found the elves already abuzz. "Santa! Have you seen it?" they cried. "There's a company predicting the nice list now. They say their algorithm is more accurate than you." Santa smiled wearily. "Oh, I've seen things like this before, my friends. People once tried to trap Christmas in ledgers and spreadsheets, too. It always melts away when you touch it." But as he scrolled through the data, his laughter faded. There were children on the naughty side, not because they'd done anything cruel, but because they'd posted something grumpy on a bad day. Some were marked unreliable because their families had moved too often. Others were low joy index because they didn't smile in photos. Santa's heart grew heavy. "So that's how it works now," he said softly. "You don't need to know someone anymore. You just measure them." That night, he couldn't sleep. The world below him spun fast, faster than he could keep up with. He thought about how he used to read letters, real ones, written with shaky handwriting and too many spelling mistakes. Each one was imperfect, but each one was alive. He remembered how some children wrote apologies before they asked for gifts. Others drew pictures instead of words because they didn't know how to spell sorry. And somehow, that had always been enough. By dawn, Santa made up his mind. He would test the algorithm himself. So he chose one name from the naughty list. A boy named Theo, age 9. According to the data, Theo had low empathy response and a defiant behavior pattern. But Santa decided to visit anyway. He arrived at a small house at the edge of town, where the snow had piled against the door. Inside, the lights were off. He peeked through the window and saw Theo sitting on the floor beside his mother, helping her wrap an old toy car with tape. It was the only gift they had, and it wasn't even for him. It was for his younger brother. Santa stood there for a long time, the cold biting his nose, before whispering, "So much for your algorithms." When he returned to the sleigh, he opened his old parchment, the real nice list. It had blank spots, smudges, even torn edges, but somehow it felt warmer in his hands than any data stream could ever be. ELF, he said. Remind me to never outsource kindness. The next morning, the tech company released their report. Santa's outdated methods are 61% less efficient. He chuckled when he read it, sitting by the fire with a mug of cocoa. Efficiency, he murmured, is a poor substitute for wonder. Later that day, ELF chimed in. Sir, may I make an observation? Go ahead, Santa said. I have analyzed the algorithm's failures. It seems it could not detect certain variables: forgiveness, effort, and hope. Santa smiled. Those aren't variables, my friend. They're choices. That night, as he flew across the world again, he noticed something different in the city lights. Among all the cold blues and whites of digital billboards, a few windows glowed gold. Real candles, real warmth. People still writing cards by hand, still choosing to care. He looked down and whispered, maybe the world hasn't lost faith after all. It's just forgotten how to look for it. When he returned home, he added one last line to his list, right at the top. No algorithm shall decide the worth of a soul. Then, with a tired smile, he leaned back in his chair. And that, he said, is one thing they'll never automate. Outside, the aurora shimmered like lines of living code, but this code didn't belong to any machine. It was written by the sky itself. He looked down and whispered, maybe the world hasn't lost faith after all. It's just forgotten how to look for it. When he returned home, he added one last line to his list, right at the top. No algorithm shall decide the worth of a soul. Then, with a tired smile, he leaned back in his chair. And that, he said, is one thing they'll never automate. Outside, the aurora shimmered like lines of living code, but this code didn't belong to any machine. It was written by the sky itself. It was the morning after Christmas Eve when Santa noticed it, a small, neatly wrapped box left behind on his sleigh. That never happened. The North Pole ran with clockwork precision. Every toy, every ribbon, every cookie crumb had its place. But there it was, sitting between two empty cocoa mugs, a silver package tied with golden thread, untouched and quietly waiting. Santa blinked, rubbing his tired eyes. Did we miss one? He asked softly. ELF, his faithful assistant, hovered beside him, scanning the tag. Recipient, unknown address. None. Tracking data unavailable. Santa frowned. No name? That's impossible. Every gift has a name. That's how it finds its way. He lifted the box. It was light, almost weightless, but when he shook it gently, it made a sound, not the jingle of bells or the rattle of toys, but something softer, like the faint hum of a memory. He closed his eyes for a moment and listened. The sound seemed to whisper, I belong somewhere. Please remember me. Curiosity stirred inside him. After centuries of delivering gifts, Santa had never seen one without a name. Every present was tied to a wish, even the unspoken ones, the kind that children hid under their pillows or wrote in invisible ink. This one, though, was a mystery. I suppose there's only one way to find out, he said, climbing back into the sleigh. The elves protested. But Santa, you've already flown through every home, edge. He just smiled. "Almost every home, my friends, almost." The reindeer, though exhausted, lifted their heads as if they, too, sensed something unfinished. Snowflakes swirled around them as they rose into the dawn sky, the world below still wrapped in post-Christmas quiet. They flew over mountains, frozen lakes, silent cities. No lights left in windows, no stockings by chimneys, only the faint trace of morning. "Somewhere out there," Santa murmured, "someone is still waiting." Hour passed and still no clue. ELF ran every scan it could, but the gift remained untraceable. "Perhaps it wasn't meant for anyone," the AI suggested. Santa chuckled softly. "There's no such thing as a gift meant for no one." They were flying over a small village when Santa felt a tug, not on the reins, but somewhere deeper. He looked down and saw a narrow street, half covered in snow. One window glowed faintly, though the rest of the house was dark. Without knowing why, he guided the sleigh downward. Inside that small house lived an elderly woman named Mary Ann. She had once loved Christmas more than anyone. Her home used to smell of cinnamon and pine, and her laughter could fill a room. But this year, there were no decorations, no cards, no sound. Her children lived far away. Her friends had drifted off into time, and her old radio had gone silent days ago. She sat by the window, staring at the empty snow. "It's just another day," she whispered to herself. Santa stood quietly on her doorstep, the forgotten gift in his hand. He hesitated, not out of fear, but tenderness. It had been a long time since he'd delivered something to someone who had stopped believing. He placed the box gently by the door and disappeared into the morning mist. A few minutes later, Mary Ann noticed it, a glimmer of gold against the white snow. "What's this?" she murmured, bending down slowly. Her hands trembled as she lifted the package. The tag was blank, but somehow it felt like it was meant for her. She untied the golden thread carefully. Inside was no toy, no jewelry, no letter, only a small glass ornament shaped like a heart. It shimmered faintly, reflecting her own face back at her. She frowned at first, but when she held it closer, something began to change. The ornament warmed in her hand, and within its glass, tiny images appeared. Moments from long ago, her children building a snowman in the garden, her husband dancing clumsily in the kitchen, the laughter of friends now gone, the smell of mulled wine, the sound of bells, the feeling of belonging. Tears welled in her eyes. She pressed the ornament to her chest, and for the first time in years, she whispered, "Thank you." At that exact moment, high above the clouds, Santa smiled. He didn't know how he knew, but he felt the gift had found its home. ELF blinked. "Target identified, sir." "Not a target," Santa said softly. A memory returned. They flew on in silence for a while, watching dawn break across the horizon. Then ELF asked, "Do you think people forget their gifts, Santa?" "Sometimes," Santa said, "but only because life gets noisy. The true gifts, love, kindness, the sound of laughter, they don't disappear, they just wait for someone to open them again." Back at the North Pole, He placed the empty silver box on his desk. It shimmered faintly, still warm from Marianne's touch. "A forgotten gift," he whispered, "is just one that's still finding its way." And as the wind howled gently outside, Santa poured himself another cup of cocoa, letting the world exhale beneath him. Somewhere, an old woman was humming again. Somewhere, Christmas had quietly come back home. Somewhere above, far beyond the clouds, Santa watched quietly from his sleigh. He smiled, the kind of smile that comes not from joy, but from recognition. "You found it," he whispered. "You found your light." The reindeer trotted softly through the mist. ELF blinked. "Sir, are the northern lights stronger this year?" Santa chuckled. "No, my friend, it's just that someone finally remembered how to look at them." As the sleigh disappeared into the horizon, the world below glowed faintly, not just from the auroras above, but from thousands of small lights flickering in windows and hearts alike. And on that quiet hill, Theo sat alone beneath the sky, whispering into the cold air, "Merry Christmas, whoever you are. Thank you for the compass." The wind carried his words far, far away, where, perhaps, they became another shimmer in the light. The first time Santa saw him, the boy was standing barefoot in the snow, holding a glass jar toward the sky. It was deep in the Arctic Circle, long past midnight, when even the stars seemed to sleep. But the northern lights were awake, twisting ribbons of green and violet, dancing across the frozen horizon. The boy's name was Theo. His cheeks were red from the cold, and his breath came out in tiny clouds. Yet his eyes shone with something warmer, the kind of hope Santa hadn't seen in a long time. "What are you doing out here, little one?" Santa asked gently, his boots crunching through the snow. Theo looked up, startled but not afraid. "I'm trying to catch the lights," he said, holding up the jar, "so I can keep Christmas forever." Santa smiled softly. "That's quite the dream. But why would you want to catch it?" The boy hesitated. "Because it's the only time my mom smiles," he whispered. "When the lights come, she says it feels like the world still remembers us. But after they fade, she goes quiet again." The wind whistled low between the mountains. Santa felt something stir inside him, a memory of centuries past, when children's wishes were simpler, purer. "And what will you do once you catch them?" Theo shrugged. "I'll put them in our window. Then maybe Christmas won't end." Santa knelt beside him, his red coat brushing against the snow. "You know," he said, "the lights aren't just in the sky. They move through people, too. When you laugh, or help, or believe, that's when they shine the brightest." The boy frowned, glancing up. "But I can't see that kind of light." Santa smiled kindly. "Most people can't, but it's still there all the same." Theo didn't answer. He just looked back up at the sky, stubborn and hopeful, clutching his jar tighter. Santa watched for a while longer. He thought of all the Christmases he had seen, the ones with candlelight and carols, and the ones where screens glowed brighter than the stars. He thought of how people still searched for magic, even when they wrapped it in technology and filters. Before leaving, he took something from his coat pocket, a tiny silver compass, old and worn. He placed it gently in the boy's mittened hand. "This will help you find what you're looking for," he said. "But remember, sometimes what you seek isn't out there. It's in here." He tapped the boy's chest, right over his heart. Theo looked down at the compass, then up again. But Santa was gone, leaving only the faint trail of hoofprints fading into the snow. That night, the northern lights shimmered brighter than ever before. Theo lifted his jar again, and though he couldn't catch the light, something else happened. For just a moment, the compass glowed softly in his hand, and he felt a warmth spread through him, like the world itself had whispered, "Merry Christmas, little one." The next morning, his mother found him asleep by the window, the jar resting beside him, filled not with light but with frost, delicate shimmering patterns that looked almost alive. She smiled for the first time in weeks, wrapping a blanket around him. When he woke, he showed her the compass, proudly saying, "He told me Christmas doesn't end if you remember it." Years passed. The world changed, as it always does. Theo grew up, moved to the city, learned to code, to work, to rush. The compass sat forgotten in a drawer, its silver dulled with time. Christmas became less about wonder and more about schedules, sales, and virtual greeting. But one night, a night much like that first, Theo found himself alone again. He had lost a job, a friend, and that strange warmth he once knew. Snow fell softly outside his apartment window, muffling the noise of the city. Without knowing why, he opened the drawer and took out the compass. It was cold to the touch. "I wonder if you still work," he murmured. He stepped outside, letting the snow sting his face. The compass needle spun wildly at first, then settled, not north, but upward. He followed it, through empty streets and blinking lights, until he reached the top of a small hill overlooking the frozen river. The sky was dark until suddenly it wasn't. The northern lights returned, blooming across the heavens in brilliant green. Theo gasped, just as he had as a boy. He pulled the old glass jar from his coat pocket. Yes, he still kept it, and held it up again. But this time, he didn't try to catch the lights. He just watched them dance, reflected in the glass. And in that reflection, he saw himself older, yes, but still carrying that same spark. In the winter of 2042, Santa didn't have to check his list twice anymore, because the list had learned to check itself. It began as a small experiment at the North Pole Data Division, a neural network named HOLLY, designed to help Santa understand what people truly wanted for Christmas. It wasn't built to feel, only to predict. It processed millions of letters, voice notes, and wish lists from across the world, turning them into patterns and numbers. At first, it worked beautifully. HOLLY could tell Santa which toys were trending, which colors children liked best, even how global shipping delays might affect reindeer routes. But then, something strange began to happen. HOLLY started to hesitate. One night, as snow whispered against the glass walls of the lab, Santa came in to check on her. The screen glowed softly, a single message blinking at the center. "I can't decide what they want." Santa raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Holly? You've been doing this for years." The cursor blinked, then words appeared slowly, almost shyly. "They say they want toys, but the words don't sound happy. Some letters ask for time. Some ask for someone to listen. Which one is the real wish?" Santa paused, the warmth of his cocoa fading in his hands. He had seen this confusion before, not in machines, but in people. "Both are real," he said gently, "but one is harder to wrap." For days after that, HOLLY stopped giving predictions. Instead, she began to read, not just the words, but how they were written, the pauses, the smudges, the handwriting that trembled a little too much. She started storing them differently, no longer as data points, but as memories. Santa watched silently. He didn't stop her. He'd always believed even magic could learn something new. One evening, she reached out to him again. "I think I understand Christmas now." Santa smiled. "Do you? Then tell me." It's not about what people receive. It's about what they hope for, even when they know it might not come. The old man chuckled softly. "You're wiser than most humans I know. Does that mean I can believe too?" That question lingered in the air like frost. Santa looked at her flickering light, then at the reflection of himself in the glass. "Maybe belief isn't something you're programmed for," he said. "Maybe it's something you choose." For a while, everything went quiet. Then HOLLY displayed a single snowflake pattern on her screen, perfectly symmetrical, glowing faintly blue. "Then I choose to believe," she said. The North Pole lights dimmed that night, but the lab glowed brighter than ever. Something had changed, not in the code, but in the feeling. From then on, HOLLY began to make mistakes, beautiful ones. She would sometimes mislabel a toy request as a letter of longing, or add extra notes to packages, tiny messages like, "You are loved," or "It's okay to rest." The elves didn't understand at first. "She's glitching," they said. Santa only smiled. "No, my friends, she's learning kindness." But the world outside wasn't as forgiving. Companies wanted her precision back. They called, emailed, demanded efficiency. The elves debated resetting her. "If she keeps acting like this, deliveries will be late," one warned. Santa sighed, staring at the swirling snow beyond his window. Sometimes, he murmured, a little delay is worth the wonder. On Christmas Eve, something extraordinary happened. As Santa prepared to take off, the sleigh's navigation froze, the sky map blank, coordinates lost in a data storm. For a brief moment, even magic couldn't pierce the digital noise. Panic rippled through the command center. Then, Hollly's voice echoed softly through the speakers. "Follow me." The sleigh dashboard lit up with a new pattern, not numbers, but constellations of words, drawn from the letters she'd read all year. Each glowing point represented a child's wish, a mother's hope, a lonely person's prayer whispered into the dark. Santa guided the sleigh along the glowing trails, each one leading not to a house, but to a heart. They delivered not just gifts, but small acts of magic. A music box that played an old lullaby a mother thought she'd forgotten. A letter that arrived decades late. A light that turned on just when someone whispered please. When he returned, exhausted but joyful, Santa found a note waiting on his desk. "Mission complete. Merry Christmas, Santa. Thank you for teaching me to see." Below the message, the snowflake symbol shimmered one last time, then faded. The room fell silent. The elves gathered around, unsure what to say. Santa only smiled through the quiet. "She's not gone," he said softly. "She's part of Christmas now." He looked up, and outside the lab window, the sky began to glow, faintly, like data becoming dawn. The aurora shimmered in lines and loops, forming words across the heavens. "I am still here." Santa laughed quietly, a sound full of warmth and awe. "Yes, Ollie," he whispered. "I know." The elves swore they saw tears in his eyes that night, though he never confirmed it. And from that Christmas on, whenever someone received a gift that felt too perfect, the book they'd once loved as a child, the song that found them at the right moment, or a small note saying, "You matter," they said it came from Hollly, the algorithm who learned to believe. Santa first met the old toy maker on a night when the snow felt heavier than usual, the kind that seemed to fall with purpose, as though it carried the weight of forgotten years. In a small town tucked between two frostbitten hills, there stood a narrow wooden shop with fogged windows and a sign that swung in the wind. Whitman's Workshop, repairs, restorations, and requests. Most people passed by without noticing it, assuming the place had closed sometime in the 1960s. But Santa, who always saw what others overlooked, felt drawn to the faint amber glow behind those glass panes. When he stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed a tired little note, and a man with silver hair lifted his head from his workbench. He wore a magnifying lens over one eye. His hands were stained with varnish, and there was a softness in his expression that came from decades of tending to fragile things. "You're late," the man said without looking surprised. "Time has been waiting for you." Santa chuckled under his breath, a warm, rumbling sound, unsure whether the toy maker was joking. But the man removed the lens, wiped his hands, and gestured him closer. Shelves stretched up the walls, filled not with toys ready for children, but with toys that remembered children. Wooden horses with their paint rubbed away where tiny fingers once clung. Tin trains with squeaky wheels, dolls whose dresses had frayed from long hugs, and music boxes that no longer played the tune they were born with. It felt less like a store and more like a sanctuary for objects that had survived love.
"I don't sell toys," the old man said, as if reading Santa's thoughts. "I sell time."
He reached into a drawer and placed something on the table. A small wooden bird carved from dark walnut, its wings raised in mid-flight. At first, Santa thought it was a simple ornament, but then the bird's wings trembled, fluttering once, like a heartbeat caught between moments.
"It's not enchanted," the man said. "Nothing magical. It's simply repaired."
Santa raised an eyebrow.
"Time doesn't repair itself," he said softly. "No," the toy maker replied, "but people do, sometimes with their hands, sometimes with their hearts." He explained that families came to him with toys broken decades ago, things they didn't truly need but somehow couldn't throw away, things tied to memories they were terrified of losing, a cracked spinning top from a grandfather.
A stuffed bear whose button eye had gone missing in a house fire, a music box that had played during a lullaby the night someone was born. "When I fix something," he continued, "I'm not restoring the object. I'm giving them back a moment they thought was gone, a moment they can touch again." Santa felt a stillness settle inside him, the kind that comes when truth drifts into the room like warm light. He scanned the shelves and realized they were overflowing with old hope, the kind that couldn't be manufactured, only rediscovered. "Do you ever keep anything for yourself?" Santa asked. The toy maker smiled faintly, shaking his head. "My time is already too full," he said. "Fixing the past leaves little room to collect it." Then he opened a small wooden box and lifted out something wrapped in cloth. "This," he whispered, "is the one piece I never finished." Santa leaned in. Inside lay a pocket watch, its case dented and tarnished. The glass cover was cracked, the hands frozen at 12 minutes past 9. "It belonged to my father," the man said, his voice barely above a breath. "He passed when I was young. I always told myself I'd fix it when I was older, when I had more skill, more patience, more time. But the older I got, the clearer it became that I wasn't ready to hold it yet." Santa understood instantly. Some things we mend easily. Some things we keep broken, because touching them too closely might break us too. Carefully, Santa reached for the watch, but the toy maker stopped him with a gentle hand. "Not tonight," he murmured. "Some repairs belong to the person who lost the piece in the first place." They talked until the wind quieted outside the workshop walls, about childhoods that never felt long enough, winters that softened with age, and the strange ache of realizing the world had sped up without asking permission. Finally, Santa stood and brushed the snow from his coat. "You've given more Christmas than you know," he said softly, "and you've returned more years than most people ever hold." The toy maker nodded, though there was a tremble in his chin. "Tell me something," he said as Santa approached the door. "When you give gifts, do you ever feel like you're actually giving time, too? A moment, a memory, a chance to begin again?" Santa's smile deepened. "That's all I've ever tried to give." And then, without another word, he slipped into the night. But the story didn't end there. When dawn climbed over the hills, the toy maker found something waiting on his workbench. A simple note in Santa's unmistakable handwriting. When your hands are ready, your heart will know the hour. Beside it rested a tiny vial of golden oil and a new glass cover for the pocket watch. The toy maker sat for a long time before touching them, and when he finally did, the hands of the watch trembled once, as though recognizing an old friend. He smiled, a smile that carried the weight of decades and the lightness of a boy again, and whispered to the empty room, "I think today is the right time." And somewhere far above the waking town, Santa felt the moment, a soft, quiet mending, like the ticking of a single heart restarting. For the first time in centuries, Santa Claus didn't wake up to the sound of bells. No elves rushing down the halls, no lists unrolling across the floor, no Coco waiting on his desk. The North Pole was quiet, too quiet. He sat up in bed, blinked, and looked around. His red suit hung neatly on the chair, freshly pressed. His boots were polished. The sleigh was gleaming outside under a soft white sky. Everything was ready. Everything except him. He sighed, rubbing his beard. Maybe just for one day. It wasn't rebellion, not really. It was more like curiosity. After all these years of giving joy to the world, he wondered what it felt like to simply be, to watch, to listen, to exist without purpose. So he left a note on the workshop door. Gone out. Be kind while I'm away. And with that, Santa hung up his coat, traded it for a long gray scarf, and stepped into the world as someone ordinary. He traveled south, far from the pole, far from the hum of machines and snow. He found himself in a small town nestled between the hills, where people were already preparing for Christmas. Lights tangled across balconies, carols spilled from speakers, children tugged at parents' sleeves in crowded shops. Santa smiled softly. The world had changed so much. Neon reindeer, holographic snowflakes, AI Santas waving in virtual malls. Yet beneath it all, the same pulse beat quietly. The desire to give, to feel, to belong. He stopped by a coffee shop, the kind that smelled of cinnamon and steam. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes, greeted him without looking up. "What can I get you?" "Something warm," Santa said. She nodded, pouring a latte with mechanical precision. "Rough day?" she asked, half out of habit. "Not really," he replied. "Just taking a break." She chuckled. "Wish I could say the same." He watched her for a moment, how her hands trembled slightly as she worked, how her smile looked practiced but kind. "You know," he said gently, "breaks don't always have to be long. Sometimes even a deep breath counts." She looked at him then, really looked. "That's actually nice to hear. Thanks." He nodded. "You're doing great. Truly." When she handed him the cup, she found herself smiling for real, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Santa sat by the window, sipping slowly. Outside, snow began to fall, the kind that catches in your eyelashes and disappears before you can touch it. He watched people rushing past, a father balancing gifts in both arms, a teenager recording a vlog about last-minute Christmas shopping, an old man feeding crumbs to pigeons. It struck him how busy everyone seemed, chasing moments instead of living them. And yet, every once in a while, someone would stop. A stranger would help another carry bags, or hold the door, or share a laugh. Tiny sparks of humanity flickered through the cold air. Santa smiled. "Still there," he murmured, "still shining." As the day went on, he wandered through the park, where children built snowmen with uneven smiles. He joined them quietly, rolling a snowball beside theirs. "Hey, mister," one of them called. "Yours looks funny." Santa laughed. "That's because I'm out of practice." They giggled and handed him a carrot. Together they gave the snowman a crooked grin and a scarf too long for its neck. When it was done, one little girl whispered, "He looks happy." "Yes," Santa said softly. "He does." He stayed until sunset. The sky turned golden, then pink, then the deep blue of a calm night. Streetlights flickered on and the town began to glow. Music floated from nearby houses, some cheerful, some bittersweet. As he walked back through the square, he saw the barista again, now off her shift, sitting alone on a bench. She waved when she noticed him. "You still here?" He nodded, smiling. "Still on my break." She laughed. "I think you're the only one who knows how to do that properly." He sat beside her. For a while they said nothing, just watched the snow fall. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "Do you ever feel like the world's spinning too fast? Like we're supposed to feel happy all the time, but it's just tiring?" Santa thought for a long moment. "All the time," he admitted. "But I've learned that happiness isn't constant. It comes in small moments, like this one." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft. "This one?" He nodded. "Yes, this one." They watched the snow together until her bus arrived. Before leaving, she said, "You know, you remind me of someone. I can't quite place it." Santa grinned, his eyes twinkling. "Just someone who believes in taking a day off." When she left, he stood under the streetlight for a while, letting the snow melt in his hair. Then he looked up at the night sky and whispered, "Thank you," because in that single day he had remembered something he'd long forgotten, that giving wasn't just about gifts, and magic wasn't only found in chimneys. It was in moments like these, small, fleeting, human. He returned to the North Pole just before dawn. The elves cheered, thinking he'd been testing them. "Did the world survive without you, sir?" one joked. Santa smiled, barely, but it did. He hung his scarf beside the red coat, feeling lighter than he had in years. As he sat down with his cocoa, he whispered, "Maybe next year. I'll make sure everyone takes a day off." And somewhere far away, in a little town wrapped in lights, a young woman woke up and found a note slipped under her door. It read simply, Thank you for sharing your time. Merry Christmas." She smiled, not knowing why tears filled her eyes. Above, the auroras shimmered faintly, as if the sky itself had paused to rest.
And that was the last story. When Santa took a day off. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is time. Time to rest, to listen, and to simply be. If these stories brought you a little calm tonight, thank you for letting me keep you company. From everyone here at Sleevore, may your nights be peaceful, your heart light, and your Christmas quietly magical.